Fears are growing in Iraq as the country is witnessing a fresh wave of deadly bombings. Just what message is being sent out by the latest violence? Is Iraq sliding back into bloody chaos? And how would it play on an already polarised political scene in the country? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Sahil Rahman. A man has confessed to planning a bomb attack that killed 95 people and injured over 500 others in Baghdad. Areas that are considered some of the safest in the Iraqi capital were hit on Wednesday last week. The Iraqi military has released a video of what it says is the confession of the men behind the massacre.
1 month ago, my colleague Sattar Farhan, who is my director in Syria, called me and told me that he wanted to perpetrate an operation in order to destabilize the regime. So I contacted a person from al-Mukhtar who knows about the checkpoints. I asked him to ensure that the car gets through the checkpoints. He asked for $10,000 in return. We gave him the money. He was there with Sattar in order to ensure the access of the car through the checkpoints. He took it through checkpoints in Baghdad. After that, the car went to the direction of Baghdad touristic city via the highway, then to the Ministry of Finance, where the car was detonated.
Last week's attack was one of the deadliest in months. One vehicle exploded outside the Foreign Ministry near the heavily guarded Green Zone, and there was another explosion near the Ministry of Finance. What was unusual about these attacks was that they were in areas considered to be safer than most, with extremely high levels of security. But as Qadam said, he bribed guards to let the vehicles through. In his first public address since the attacks, Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki tried to assure the country that the security issue will be tackled.
We have taken crucial measures in order to tackle the weaknesses which were exploited by terrorists to carry out their attacks. We will punish those proved to be involved in these crimes or for failing to prevent them. We shall endorse a series of wide measures to end the slackening, to stop the operations that have hampered the security authorities. Iraqi security forces have arrested those who are responsible for the attacks, and they are under interrogation.
And those bombs have rocked the political heart of Iraq too. Dozens of MPs have come together to form a rival alliance of parties in opposition to the Prime Minister's Dua party. Nouri al-Maliki has been criticised in recent months for his inability to secure Iraq. This new group will replace the United Iraqi Alliance, which has ruled parliament since 2005. This Shia-dominated coalition will include the largest Shia party, the Supreme Iraqi Islamic Council, and Muqtada al-Sadr's politicians too. Well, joining me on today's programme in Baghdad, Saeed Muttalibi, advisor to the Ministry of Dialogue and Reconciliation. In London, Sabah al-Mukhtar, president of the Arab Lawyers Association. And in Doha, Todd Kent, senior associate professor at the Doha branch of the Texas A&M University. Gentlemen, welcome to the programme. Todd, can I come to you first in Doha? I mean, the attack on the finance and foreign ministries has opened perhaps a hornet's nest of problems, and certainly intergovernment accusations have been raised. Are we seeing the spectre of sectarian divides raise its ugly face again in Iraq?
Well, certainly I think that the attacks on the seats of power, whether it be the foreign ministry or the Ministry of Finance, is really an attempt to destabilize the government. And I think that that's going to be a continuing problem, and it's going to be really important how it's responded to. You know, in 2006, when there was an attack, there was immediate reprisal. So we're seeing a lot more patience now. But certainly this is an attempt to destabilize the current regime.
Sabah al-Mukhtar in London, is that how you read these events unfolding in Baghdad?
No, certainly not. This is not a sectarian one. Unlike the previous one, this one is a very indiscriminate crime that has been committed. This is a vendetta between the various political parties, between the Islamic al-Ja'fari lot and the Maliki Dawa people, because they are coming to an election, they are vying for power, and they are being so dishonest that they have even had the audacity of producing somebody to say that he is the culprit. What about the other areas? What about the other places? What about the rockets that's gone on the Green Zone? This is an inside job of the security service, which is not a national one, but a sectarian one, parts of it follow one group and another part follows another group. And this is one way of destabilizing the situation at the present moment, showing Maliki to be the weak man, and Maliki is trying to show that he is the tough guy. But this is the war between these two, and this is not a sectarian one. This is a pure, downright political rivalry among people who are trying to win the election that they have now. Suddenly, we have a diarrhea of elections in Iraq, despite the fact that the country is in a state of war by any standard of anybody.
Well, let's just bring in Saad Mutalabi in Baghdad. You've listened to our first two speakers. One has to say, how could this have happened on targets in the Iraqi capital? They have happened, you might say, on targets of Iraqi sovereignty. So what sort of immediate message do you think those that perpetrated these crimes are sending out, not just to the Iraqi people, but to the Iraqi government?
I believe the idea behind the attack is that to show the people, try to enhance the picture that of the inability of the government to protect its citizens. Now,
well, they've done that, though, haven't they?
How,
you could say they've done that, haven't they?
Of course, yeah, that's part. Yes, of course, but, however, this is definitely cannot implicate the government or the political parties. To accuse the government of doing such thing or the political parties of shooting themselves in the leg, that's absolutely absurd. And I think Mr. al-Mukhtar is going the wrong direction in his analysis. The whole idea is that we had a progress, security progress, political progress. Now, most of the political parties, they all agreed to resolve issues through dialogue and through peaceful means of negotiations. To instigate such bombing at such scale, first, it requires, this is a state-sponsored terrorism. It cannot be by a small group aligned to some small political party from locally bred. This is definitely, there are states behind it.
Well, who is behind this? Who is behind this we will talk about perhaps later in the programme, but it does bring to the forefront, does it not, arguments and questions about the security of important sovereign buildings, government buildings in Iraq, buildings that should have been protected that weren't. The security apparatus in Iraq is not as secure as you would like the rest of the world to think.
Unfortunately, there was a false sense of security developed in the last 3 months. The Prime Minister ordered the removal of the blast walls and removal of a number of checkpoints that were vital for the success of these horrendous acts. The idea that the police are in general, or the security apparatus in general, is implicated, this is absolutely ridiculous. We understand now from the confessions that there were a number of implicated security personnel. They were arrested, 75 of them were arrested. Interrogations proved that they did receive, some of them did receive a certain amount of information, and some of them facilitated the transport of the explosives.
Well, of course,
now,
more detail. I have to say, Mr. I'm going to interrupt there. Sorry. More detail, of course, of those planning the attacks, of course, will come out in any future trial that happens in Iraq. But let's move this on now. Now we've set the ground, certainly for our viewers, about what's been going on in Baghdad. Todd Kent, let me come back to you. We've heard in the last few hours the announcement of now a new alliance of Shia political groups who are going to fight the next election in January, sidestepping, you might say, Mr. Maliki and his Dua party. I mean, how will this play out now in Iraqi politics from now till January? And what do you see happening in Iraq in terms of security and the issues of security?
Well, I think when you see usually majority governing parties tend to fall into factions. As the pie gets bigger, you have groups that want more and more of that pie. They want more and more power. And really what we're seeing here in this latest attack, the divisions within the ruling party is really an attempt to get at those resources, get at that political power. So the stakes are very high here. So I think as we move towards January, you're going to see a repositioning as people try to put themselves in place to gain a greater share of that.
Mr. al-Mukhtar in London, can I bring you in? Because as this continues, as we see the Shia groups aligning themselves in a different formation, we have the Speaker of Parliament suggesting that if Sunnis were involved in this particular attack, some of the MPs must be arrested as well. Do you think this sectarian alienation, if we put it like that, is going to be enhanced? We're going to see more of this name-calling and the divides between the different ethnic groups increase as time goes on now?
Well, certainly one of the things which is we have a problem with is that when we are looking at those individuals as political parties, I mean, you report and you are dealing with it as if it is a political movement. If you look at the picture today on television as they were showing from Baghdad, it's simply individuals. Some of them have few followers and most of them have security protection, but there are no political parties. The idea that somehow these are political parties which are negotiating, trying to have a political process is an absolute nonsense. Those are individuals. You have the Maliki, you have Ja'fari, you have few others, Alawi and what have you. They have some backing with some people, but that is not a political process at all. The situation there is that there is a total vacuum of security because that country has no security services by the standard of anybody, whereby security services are a national one. Here you have a mishmash of various groups and various militias wearing the same uniform, but they are willing to kill each other. They are willing to kill the civilians in order to achieve their master's view. So this is a situation which is not a political one. It is really a war against the people for political objectives of those individuals who claim to be political parties.
Mr. Muttalibi, let me bring you in. How do you respond to that, considering we can also back up that with there are, 7 or 8 intelligence organisations operating in Iraq? Nobody really takes responsibility if that's the accusation being made from Baghdad now, and no one trusts each other because some of them came previously from militias that were then either rejected after agreements were made or not brought into the security apparatus of the national government and of the country itself.
Well, I really don't see any sense of replying to all these comments because these accusations are totally baseless.
Are you saying that the security apparatus in Iraq is unified and that there are no sectarian divides within the security apparatus of Iraq itself, that the Shia and the Sunni security officers work very well together and that there's no problems there?
Well, what I want to say is that there were 62,000 expulsions from the Ministry of Interior alone in the last 3 years. That means a great number of the people who were affiliated to militias and who joined the security forces under political backing, they have been sacked. 62,000 people were sacked. This is one. I'm not saying the picture is perfect. We understand that there are difficult polarizations and differences. But to accuse the whole security apparatus of working for this or that, this is absolutely absurd. I traveled Baghdad, all Baghdad, with nobody armor, with no bodyguards, and myself, I drive all over Baghdad. And I pass through, I actually checking checkpoints. I go and search checkpoints on my own, and never I felt that I was in danger or I was being treated as from this side or that side. So this accusation is absolutely absurd, and I think I don't really need to reply to it.
Okay, well, you're nodding in disagreement. Okay, Mr. Muttalibi, you're just nodding in disagreement, Mr. al-Mukhtar in London. Just hold those thoughts, though, for a moment, gentlemen, because violence in Iraq has declined since the peaks of 2006 and 2007. However, it continues to be the target of frequent bomb attacks. The recent violence has raised concerns about the ability of Iraqi authorities to ensure security, especially since they are now in charge. The US security troops left the urban areas at the end of June, handing responsibility to Iraqi security forces. In an effort to normalise life, about a month later, the Iraqi Prime Minister ordered the removal of security walls across Baghdad. The blast-proof concrete walls dividing the city along ethnic lines were built to stop sectarian bloodshed. Since the attacks last week, Iraqis began restoring those walls. Todd, there does seem to be now a struggle perhaps for the government in some way, from what we're hearing from both sides of the argument, both in London and Baghdad, to find a way forward in terms of security at least?
Well, I think to win the hearts of the people, any government's going to have to, they're going to claim that they're the ones that can maintain security for the people, and that's very important. And we've seen as the U.S. has withdrawn from the urban areas, we've seen an increase in violence. I think there's a short period of opportunity, or a perceived opportunity here to destabilize. I think that it's wrong to think that any of these bombings are not strategic. They may have been, you know, whether it's a small group or a large group, they're strategic, they're for a purpose, and I think that's to get at the hands of power and to shape the future of Iraq, which is very difficult now. And we see the future of the security forces is very important, and the ability to bring people into the security forces from all different parts of the country is also going to be important if the country is going to go forward in the future.
Well, if we just move the bombing of the Baghdad ministries to one side slightly, and Sabra al-Mukhtar, you know, with the now formation of this new alliance of Shia parties announced today, should Mr. Maliki be worried, considering his party's been alienated from this group?
I don't think so. I think Maliki has the backing of the USA. Maliki has the backing of Iran. Maliki is the strong man compared to the others. He has even his own army, whatever they call it, the Prime Minister's Security Service or whatever it's called. Maliki now is calling the shots. He is trying to get the Arab countries, the neighboring countries, to be behind him. He is trying to get all those people to think that there is no alternative but him, and this raises the question of motives of various people. The Americans are talking about withdrawing. Americans have never withdrawn from anywhere. They are in Baghdad airport, in the center, in the old airport. They are in the old airport in Mosul. They are absolutely in the center of the city. They stopped sending their convoys, but they are within the cities. This is just regrouping of their troops so that they are less exposed to the resistance or to whoever is against them, regardless of their motives. I think we have to distinguish between the motives of people. They may differ, but they direct one way. And we have also to distinguish between who is leading who on for what reason. The Iranians have an interest, the Americans have an interest, the Israelis have an interest, the Maliki has an interest, everyone has an interest in keeping the situation as it is.
But in terms of, you're suggesting that it's not sectarian, that the external forces are perhaps more involved in what's going on in Iraq in terms of upsetting the status quo. Todd Kent, you have the US Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mike Mullen, questioning whether this was an indication that sectarian violence could be exacerbated on the back of what happened last Wednesday. Is it a real worry for the Americans at this moment in time? If you're hearing what Mr. al-Mukhtar said in London, you know, the Americans are still there, but they don't really want to be seen on the streets.
Yeah, exactly. The U.S. doesn't want any kind of civil war going on in Iraq. It's destabilizing. It goes against their desire to at least pull some troops out of Iraq. So any increase in violence within the cities or even the larger communities is going to be seen as a failure of U.S. policy. So they're my expectation is they'd be very concerned about an escalation, and they're probably doing everything they can to keep any retaliation from happening, because that would be an indication that maybe that this early withdrawal is a failure.
Mr. Mutalabi in Baghdad, you obviously don't want to see any sort of sectarian violence on the streets of Baghdad, but would the Iraqi government ask for American help if they needed to secure certain parts of the country?
Before answering this, I'd like just to say to congratulate the Dawa party for not entering the UIA, the new UIA, because they've actually released or re-injected life into political life in Iraq, because now all parties will enter on their own merits, and if they fail, if they win, they will know their real size, and every political party and the Shiites will have a choice to choose between that political party or that, and the Sunnis will have also the same choice in choosing between this and the other. So on this opening of the political life in Iraq, I think Maliki and the Dawa party played it absolutely correct in opening political life and a freer competition for everybody.
Well, we'll see what happens in January.
Returning the Americans,
sorry,
yeah, definitely. As for the Americans, no, definitely we will not ask the Americans back. We are very happy to see them out of our cities, into their bases. Wherever their bases are, they are inside their bases. They are not allowed to leave their bases without Iraqi approval. So anyway, we're very happy to see them in their bases, and we'll be happier when they leave the country altogether.
But if the situation got worse in Baghdad, and we have to talk about ifs and buts here, if the situation got worse in Baghdad and security personnel in Iraq could not handle the situation, would you call upon American assistance?
Again, no, because the war in Iraq is not war of numbers and tanks and F-16s. It's war of intelligence. And the Americans were not of any help to us during the 2005, 6, and 7, and 8. They were actually a hindrance to Iraqi operations. They provided zero information intelligence. They released criminals from the jails, and then we had to arrest them again or collect their bodies after committing a crime. So we cannot expect real help from the Americans on this level. Yes, we'll ask them for help if there is an external attack on Iraq. But if it's a matter of insurgents and the Ba'ath Party and the deceased the Ba'ath Party and Al-Qaeda, no, we don't need their help because, as I said, they cannot supply us with the help that we require.
Well, Mr. al-Mukhtar in London, you were disagreeing, or you seem to be shaking your head with disbelief of what you're hearing in Baghdad. What's your reaction there?
It's amazing. If the Americans were a hindrance, why did Maliki insist on signing the agreement with the Americans against the wishes of everybody?
To jump in here, I have to jump in here.
Sorry, can I finish, please? No. Can I finish, please?
I need time.
Let that is the situation, why did Maliki sign the treaty? And the second thing is that the choices that the Iraqis have now is absolutely sectarian, because as we have just heard, the choices are for leadership of one Shiite group or another Shiite group. The Americans, as far as they are concerned, they are happy, quite happy to stay there, because the bases they have built there, they were the people who started the disaster. There is no problem for them to worry that they might be accused of a civil war, because the civil war came with them, and it will continue whether they are there or they go. It will only stop if they leave the country, as according to my friend in Baghdad, if the government wants them to leave, and I don't see why they can't ask them to leave.
Mr. Muttalibi, I'll let you respond to that.
Thank you very much. Yes, the SOFA was changed from the name SOFA into a withdrawal of American troops or international troops from Iraq. The government signed the agreement so the Americans would leave us. First, they leave into the cities, and during next year, they will only remain in Iraq between 35 to 50,000 troops. And by the end of 2011, all American troops will leave. As why we don't ask them to, we want them to leave today, but for reasons of the Iraqi, not the security forces, but the Iraqi army. Our Iraqi army is incapable of defending Iraq at present. Therefore, we need the Americans to protect our borders, to protect Iraq from an external attack, not internal attack. We are not worried with the internal. There are, as I said, there are some sectarian elements, but the sectarian war has finished and gone. We have a political struggle, and the political struggle...
Mr. Muttalibi, I'm very sorry, we'll have to stop it because we're running out of time. It does seem that the status of the security services both in and around Iraq will be up for debate, certainly on future editions of Inside Story. To all of my guests in Baghdad, London and Doha, thank you for joining us, gentlemen.
Thank you.
That's it for the moment from Inside Story. I'm Sahil Rahman. Thanks very much for joining us. Until next time, goodbye.